the markets have jumped as they have since the election on the notion at the worst, it's going to be split government. Potentially a President Biden, before that looked like it was inevitable, working with a Republican Congress, or at least a Republican Senate. What if the Senate does flip to Dick Grasso, the former big board chairman and CEO? Dick, very good to have you. Happy New Year to you. What do you think?
Happy New Year, Neil. Always great to be with you. Well, I think that the biggest cheerleader, although somewhat in quiet for Republican retention of the Senate, is Joe Biden himself. I mean, when you think about it, over the course of his career, Joe Biden has been a moderate, and split government has been good for the markets, good for the economy, and good for the country. So I think Joe Biden would love nothing more than to have the Republicans retain control of the Senate, and he'll have then a stalking horse to rail against, but he'll also have the fortitude to avoid the very extreme left positions being advocated by those in the progressive wing of the Democrat Party. He'll also have the ammunition to, if you will, keep Bernie Sanders right where he is in the Senate, as opposed to putting him in as Labor Secretary. So I think tonight Joe Biden is going to quietly root for one, if not two of those seats to retain in Republican hands, and he will then have, I think, the makings of a very good and balanced economy. You've got a Fed and Treasury that's going to be in harmony. Janet Yellen and Jay Powell will work together. The Fed has said they're going to accommodate. I think, Neil, we're in for a golden period over the next 1 to 3 years.
That is, if it is still split government. If it is not, and they take the Senate, then a lot more of what some of those progressives want to do can get done. How would the markets react to that?
Well, I don't think the markets will react in a positive vein initially, Neil. But remember one thing. Yeah. At best, you're going to have a split, basically enfranchises Joe Manchin to be the real power broker. He's already said he's not going to support packing the Supreme Court. West Virginia is not a blue state. So Joe Manchin is a very smart politician, and I think he's going to be a very important person in terms of preventing some of the free for everything economy that the left and far left would advocate.
You know, Dick, when I look at various sectors of this bull market and how it's performed under this president, while small cap stocks have rebounded from their lows, they were sort of, dragging their feet. I would imagine they might get a second chance in an extended leg of this rally. Maybe not technology, but your thoughts?
Well, I think it's going to be very hard for a Republican, Senate, be it majority or minority, to block things such as an infrastructure bill, relief for Americans who are hurting as a result of the pandemic. So I think that, the initial knee-jerk reaction of the market will be a negative one if the Republicans lose the Senate. But in the longer horizon, I think there is still a case to be made that we're looking at over the next few years, a very strong equity market performance. Some of the laggards of the last 1 to 3 years can catch up. I think some of the new technologies are going to advance. And frankly, Neil, when you look at the first and second quarters of 21, you're going to have some very easy comparators from an earnings standpoint, which will generate enthusiasm. The Fed is not going to move rates. And so I suspect you could look at a 35,000 Dow. You could easily look over the next few years at a 37 to 40,000 Dow. But remember one thing, Neil.
Go ahead.
You're talking to the ultimate optimist. I've never bet against America, and I've never been wrong.
No, I remember that well. I do want to pick your brain very, very quickly on this NYSE reversal of these the three Chinese firms that was looking at delisting them. Not so now. Was there pressure on them to reverse?
I think someone was over their skis, or if you will, the first announcement was premature. Look, the reality is you've got a new administration coming in less than 2 weeks or 2 weeks or so, and they're going to be looking at ways to deal with the threat, but also the opportunity of a better relationship, a more harmonious relationship with the Beijing government. And one of the things you don't want to do, Neil, is cripple the capital markets, the free flow of capital between Hong Kong, Shanghai, New York, and the U.S. markets in general. So I think there may have been a little bit of a gun jumping on the part of that first NYSE announcement. I applaud their ability to retract it quickly. And I think that everyone's got to step back and take a deep breath, couple of aspirin, and look at how we get to a better place with the People's Republic of China, which is both a potential competitor and threat, but also a very large economic partner to this nation.
All right, Dick Grasso, thank you very, very much, my friend.